We are now going to hear from Powen Shiah. Powen handles communications at the Sovereign Tech Fund, highlighting the importance of open source digital infrastructure and the government's role in supporting it. He's worked in product marketing, communications, and internationalization in technology organizations in Germany and in the US. Also, he has a growing collection of savory popcorn seasonings. So, Powen is here to talk to us about documenting digital infrastructure and explaining complex open source technologies for everyone. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for letting me talk to you about this topic. And especially thank you, I think, to Tiffany, who did a great talk about open source earlier, so I can cut that part out of my talk so that I don't have to explain what it is to the audience. But I realized as I was working on the slides at the very last minute that maybe I needed to build in a slide where I edited myself, because I realized that the talk title is extremely long. And I'm sure you've all run into this, where you end up writing very long things because you can't think of a shorter way to say them. But I did not, because I couldn't figure out how to make editing marks on PowerPoint, which I'm sure someone can help me with later. But basically, to give sort of an intro to what I'm going to talk about today, in addition to what Andrea already said, is the thing that I am confronted with, or that we at the Sovereign Tech Agency are confronted with, is that our audience includes both people in government officials, and also people who are somewhere really far away from that, like kernel developers. And when we write and when we communicate, when we try to explain the things that we're doing, we kind of need to speak to both of them. And that's a little bit tough. And I'm going to go through a little bit of our process of how we do it and why we do it. And along the way, if it's okay, it might sound occasionally like a little bit of an advertisement, but I'll try to explain what the Sovereign Tech Agency does, which is that we invest in critical open source components like core utils, FFmpeg, and systemd, technologies that are basically open technologies that power everything from scientific research to banking systems to the apps in your phones and in your devices. So there's just to get started with that. A little bit about me. So I think I also felt okay saying this because I also do not come from let's say a hard technology computer science background. I definitely am glad that I took my one and only computer science class in college during my pass-fail semester so that I could just limp through. But I do love and I'm interested in technology and computers more on sort of the, I always say, in the sociological side of what human beings do with technology and how we work together and how it changes how we act. So coming from this marketing background in mostly sort of technology startups, I really never thought that I would find myself explaining something like time synchronization protocols or what memory safety is and why we need it in different system utilities to people who are sometimes on the tech side, but not in an area that they know with those particular things, and sometimes actually are policy analysts, in think tanks, or even folks who are legislative aides. So it's a little bit about my background and how I got into this. So at the Sovereign Tech Agency, just to explain a little bit, we support the development, the improvement, and the maintenance of open digital infrastructure. So those are the open source components that basically have become part of every single type of technological undertaking, every digital undertaking that we have in the world today. And we do this because we understand it as a foundation for the economy and for a modern society, for democracy, that all these things, which we all come to rely on without actually knowing that they're there, continue to exist and continue to function. So actually, I was just thinking in the last talk, which talked a lot about maintenance, that has become a topic that is very near and dear to my heart, because these things exist, so we're not investing or commissioning work on things that are prototypes. We're actually working at technologies that everybody's already built into their products, built into their websites, and built into other tools and other software. Oops, sorry, this thing keeps popping, but I will just try to keep on going. So what does this mean basically for my writing style, or the goal or the reasons that we're writing? So I've had to really develop an understanding and a way of writing that really serves two purposes, despite the fact that there are 3 bullet points. Transparency about public investments. So the Sovereign Tech Agency works with money from the German government. At the moment, we're attached to the German ministry, the new German Ministry for Digitalization and State Modernization. And also, and this is the part why I even decided to join, is that we're doing advocacy for digital infrastructure that most people don't even know exists. So I felt a little bit like an imposter submitting a talk to this because we're not really doing traditional technical documentation. We're doing something that's basically public accountability, so telling you how your tax euros are being spent, and also advocacy for a type of infrastructure that most people never think about, and thank goodness, never need to think about. And the last part of that, and that's why I added on this last bullet point, is that one of the goals of the work that I do and why I have my coworker Teresa that is also working on communications, and actually we have a whole bunch of people on our team who, even if it's not on their job title, really understand and value the reasons why we talk about the work that we do, is because it's important to highlight this. And also in both directions, both to like the more technical folks and the technical communities that end up doing the work, but also to government representatives and people making policy, that we're building trust and sort of helping folks understand the expertise that we bring into this through technical accuracy. Because if you're like me and like you're rewriting or looking at documentation that someone's written about a particular technology or investment, and then suddenly need to sort of zoom in, and you want to make sure that you're getting the terms correct. I will move off this slide very quickly because I think it will get very dizzy. But that is my answer, basically, to how do we do this. Like, if I had to do a nutshell, is you really start in the big picture. You look at what the broadest reasons of what does a technology do, where is it used, why is it important, that type of stuff. And then that is for maybe folks like me or for folks who don't have as much of a software development background. And then you get more detailed in every section of the document, every section of our technology profiles that I'll talk to you about, and be able to explain a little bit more about what exactly is the money going into? What are the components? What are the reasons that certain things are being done? Why are we engaging in providing investment and financing for other types of things? So, why do we do it? So, for me personally, for the way that I think about it, is that writing is thinking, which I hope most of you agree with and have heard of this before, and it's also learning. So when I or my coworker, when we sit down and write technology profiles, when we try to explain that work that we're doing, we're also getting clarity for ourselves, and we're learning about the technologies, even if I'm never going to become an expert in it or be able to actually engage in that open source community or help them with their documentation. But there are 2 sub-aspects to that. So basically, the technology profiles, going back to our sort of public accountability mission, are a way to show our work. So they're a way to say, hey, we invested a bunch of money in a project called Pendulum. Here's when the contract is running for. Here's the work they're going to do. Here's why it's important. Here are the sectors that it's used in. And so that, any one of you could go on our website and say, okay, I get it. That's why, this contract for 100,000 euros, for example, has been, issued or given to a certain group of people to work on these critical milestones. And we also need to use our writing, the moments that we take to write, to step back, to zoom out. I guess that GIF earlier was zooming in, and to take a holistic view and use the opportunities for every single one of these technology profiles to build a narrative, to explain, why are these different technologies important. Maybe there's a subgroup of, for example, things that are being rewritten because they need, those are critical utilities that should be in memory-safe languages like Rust or Swift. Or maybe there's another reason that we're, or another focus that we have in particular investments that we're making at the Sovereign Tech Fund or through the Sovereign Tech Fellowship. So that's the why. And then how. So I hope that this part is a little bit more interesting for you folks, because I think that this is the part that maybe is a little bit more cross-applicable to the work that you're doing in your day-to-day. So I have really been trying to build documentation and documenting as a habit. That I think someone had a sticker outside that said, did it really happen if you didn't write about it or if you didn't document it? And that's what I'm also trying to encourage, and what I'm glad that I have support in our organization from, is that when we do things, of course, the real work is identifying a technology, evaluating it, building up like the whole legal contract stuff, and then working with the people who are going to do the work on the open source component or the technology. But like, if we don't tell anybody about it, did it happen? I mean, yes, of course, but also like, it's important for folks to understand that there are people who were up until that point maybe only volunteers working on a particular critical component, and now they have a chance to be paid for their work, to be able to work on things that maybe sat on the sidelines because they didn't have enough capacity, all those sorts of things. Yeah, and then so documenting as advocacy, I mentioned that a little bit, and that's already sort of what we're talking about, is like highlighting these components, trying to help people understand the technologies, trying to make sure that even the concept of digital infrastructure is a thing, as we often try to talk about it that way. And then finally, documenting as accountability, as we said, like making sure to show our work, making sure that people know what we're doing, and trying to be a little bit of a blueprint. So that's one of the things that we also want to do, is that it's just right now we're funded by a German ministry, but all these global open source components, the infrastructures, the building blocks, the foundational technologies that sort of underpin all of modern society, to not be grandiose about it, really need to be, it's a collective problem, or a collective issue that not just Germany, but other organizations, other countries, other international organizations from the EU to the UN could also be looking at. And so we want to be able to show our work and be accountable and say, this is how we're doing it, and we would love it if you would work with us, and we would love to coordinate, or we're happy to show you how we did it, and you can set up a sovereign tech agency or a sovereign tech fund in your country. And I wanted to talk really like exactly how we do it, and that's what this little box is on the side. So we produce a lot of documentation for internal purposes, for decision making, for technical evaluation, for the contracting that I talked about, because we use public procurement basically as a tool. So we steal from that. So I was talking to Chris earlier, and I was like, yeah, I'm thinking about like how we can expand like our capacity in our team for creating and writing more about the technologies that we invest in and the kind of technologies the Commission work on. And I was like, yeah, it's mostly in English because that's what we work in, but also because we're doing procurement under German law. Like the lawyers produce things, and maybe somebody who wants to help us needs to be able to read all of it. So or doesn't need to, but it's better if they're able to read all of it. So we're leveraging this existing documentation. So I'm reading all of that when I'm writing one of these technology profiles and trying to explain. But then we're also just making sure to reference and look back on the documents that other people have written. And of course, they're not written for external consumption. So when you go through this process of writing for external readers and external audiences, to make sure that you're not accidentally leaking things sort of to the outside that don't need to be told. It's not like we have anything really to hide, but like you don't need to know certain things. Yeah, and the next step was to say intervene in the process. So and I really love that I work in a team where they're open to this. So we were talking again about like for our internal processes, for internal descriptions, for the decision making. They were like, oh, we have like these templates that we use when we're sort of writing for the people who are going to be deciding whether certain technologies fit the criteria. Can we create it so that or can we adjust the template so that it's closer to the things that you publish on the website? And I was like, yes, please use the same like headings that we use, so that like the technology or the things that you're writing actually then also are closer to what we will be using in the end. So I was really, really gratified and really happy that that was an option. And the last thing is to ask for help. So I mean, as I said, we have technologists on staff. We have folks who are who've done a lot of open source work themselves, who are software developers, or who have architects and things like that on our team. And so I lean on them very heavily to say, hey, we drafted something. Please, can you take a look at it and let me know that I haven't. If I share this with the project to ask them to review it, that they're not going to like respond and say, oh, well, clearly Powen has no idea what he's talking about. That's my deepest fear, is to have someone be like, oh, someone who has no idea what they're talking about wrote this thing. Yeah. So I want to make sure I get to the next few parts of everything. So I've been talking very abstractly about the work that that we're doing sort of in terms of documenting technology, and I'm going to show you a little bit of that next. And I just wanted to, before I do that, say that the process just to describe it, involves also coordinating with all these open source communities, people who are working on the technologies, working on the projects, and then reviewing our internal technical assessments, and then crafting narratives that explain things like, why are we choosing to invest and commission work on a memory-safe replacement for GNU core utils? And I'm like, okay, that's like the headline, and I'm like, I don't really know what that means, but I will learn, and then we'll make sure that it fits the overall narrative of why we exist as an organization, sort of within this context of also needing to constantly justify and make sure that people who are not super technical understand the work that we're doing and why it's necessary and worthy of continued financing. Exactly. So, as before I get to the next slide, I just want to say I'm always really happy to be and gratified to be at an organization that considers the advocacy part and the explanation part and the documentation part just as important as the actual, or not just as important, but like has a role in the organization next to the folks who are doing the investments and identifying technologies and things like that. So you do not have to read all this. I just wanted to show it as an example. So I'm going to show two case studies. One is Project Pendulum, this one, and then we have Log4j, which is another project and technology that we invested in, and tell a little bit of a story about this. So basically, if you scan the QR code, it should take you to the page where we have this full technology profile. You don't have to. I will tell you all about sort of what's going on. I'll try not to get too deep into this because overall, like this is just the introductory paragraphs, but the whole thing is around 620 words long. So it's not super, super long. We have, as I said, like we go in this sort of zoom in methodology. So we start with a name, Pendulum, and what does Pendulum do? It works on providing accurate time on millions of devices and networks fundamental to the internet and other critical infrastructure. So that's like, for the person who reads one line, it's like, huh, okay. And then like, are you curious? And if you are, then we have this thing on the right side, which explains it like a little bit in more detail. So I can give you the short version of it. Project Pendulum basically is a project that is rewriting the network time protocol or implementing the network time protocol and the precision time protocols in memory-safe language, basically in Rust. And how these two protocols work is the part where I think in the proposal for this, I was like, it sounds like magic when they're talking about it. Because honestly, they were saying we are, at least the network time protocol, is helping people synchronize all the devices in the world to know what time it is. And like, if you have worked on software before, like time zones are like a horrible thing. But also like, the internet doesn't work if they don't know what time it is. Like, I mean, we just all went through a time change on Sunday, and I was really thinking about that because it's like now everything just changes automatically, and that's because like our device, not everything, but like kitchen clocks probably not, but like your devices, the things that you're checking time on most of the time are synchronized to a server. So it's like, okay, it is exactly this time. And like whether it's off by a minute or not is not so important for you or me maybe, but like in device land and sort of like, I think the great example, which is actually on the page because I was rereading it earlier, is like we've all had to do those, what are they called, one-time passcode things where like you generate like when you log in with your username and password and then you also get like a code that you have to enter. That actually requires the time because those things expire. So like if you don't have an exact time then that your devices share, like both the place you're trying to log into and the device that's like generating the 6-digit code or whatever, then it doesn't work. So that's just like the sort of for normal users explanation, but there's lots and lots of things like this all over the internet, all over devices about how why time is essential. And the one really interesting thing, or one other interesting thing I thought about when I was learning about NTP and PTP was actually the story of the person who was working on it. So I've forgotten his name because he passed away, I think, 2 years ago. But there was like one main developer, I think, in Delaware in the US, who was like the person who was sort of maintaining the NTP protocol or the network time protocol. And I think towards the end of his life, he was going blind. And I don't think he was officially getting paid for this work. So you just have this like human story of a person who's, been shepherding this critical project for the last, I don't know exactly, but like, let's say dozens of years. and everyone was wondering what will happen to this thing that is like underpinning the internet when this guy, I think his name is Donald, but I don't remember. I feel really bad about this. When he passes away, and unfortunately he did, but like also there were folks who took up the mantle, and I appreciate the work that everyone does, and all those folks that are doing on these kinds of things. So that's just a brief like. You discover and uncover these human stories like all the way along doing technology profiles. So it's not dry work, even though sometimes it seems like you're talking about like just bits and bytes. And just before I moved on to the next case study, I just wanted to say the other sections are, so these are built up with like a title, a subtitle. We talk about the different amounts of investments and try to share like the years that the work is being done. We link to the project. We have a sort of general description, and then we have two other sections which are called Why is this important? So we have another chance to explain to people who are a little bit more interested, which I just did with all of you, and I hope it wasn't too boring, like why the network time protocol is important. And then at the very end, more accountability, we say, what are we supporting? What are we investing in? And that's where we sort of summarize the contractual milestones that are in the project so that, like, if hopefully you'll laugh at this thing, but basically if someone on the internet is like, I hate this technology, why are they investing in it? And then they actually read down to the bottom and they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I guess I'm okay with that. Like that's actually happened. Like if you read Reddit forums, I was like, that's why we do it. Thank you for like, if you might be like in the technology wars totally on another side and really hate this particular open source project, but then when you read the description, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. They did something smart. So I appreciate that. Yeah, and then sort of the big case study or the sort of the big technology that hopefully more folks have heard of is the Log4j, which enhances the project that we invested in, or the part enhancing security, stability, and confidence in Java logging. And I don't want to like rehash the whole story. You can hear it like much better in other places. But basically, in December of 2021, there was a vulnerability in Log4j, which was known as Log4Shell, and it affected billions of devices all over the world. Because who knew how many places they were using Java logging, and it would have allowed people to access, I think, those systems in a way that was obviously not intended. And this was one of the things that sort of broke out of the bubble, so into sort of mainstream news. And that's also sort of one of the stories of the genesis of the Sovereign Tech Fund, and then now, as we are the Sovereign Tech Agency with multiple programs, is that governments realized these are critical things that are used everywhere, and there are just people working on them, and sometimes just in their free time. And if we need to support them, it's like, if you imagine, we always, in our work, like end up talking a lot about in analogies, basically. And and the ones we really like is Nadia Ekbal wrote a book called Roads and Bridges, talking about open source infrastructure. Highly recommend it. And basically, if you imagine that every street in the world, which whether you're cars or bicycles or every sort of like surface was just maintained by somebody who really liked streets in that corner of your neighborhood. And then everybody started driving on it. Businesses are using them to get to work. Kids are riding school buses or bikes to school. And they're all just like, oh, hey, Bob, like this, or Jane, in front of your street here, it's a little bit like rocky. Can you fix that? And Jane is like, I just did it because I like building streets in front of my house. And that's not a great way to run a society. So it's great because open source folks have been doing this and have been sort of underpinning and like building the foundations for our modern world. But there is, and that's the argument that we're making, a way for, or there is a role, I think, for government to also help secure digital infrastructure. So, right. And we try not to forget, and then I wanted to end this with just like a brief shout out to the people behind the code. So one of the reasons I do the work that I do and why I'm really happy and gratified to be able to do it is that we're really highlighting people who are often volunteers, people whose work is invisible, and also people who struggle to explain what they're doing. The person who is writing code or leading a community as a maintainer is not always the same person who is great at writing or great at community engagement or talking about what they're doing in public. So that's one of the things that I really appreciate and love to be able to do. And on that note, I also want to make a shout out to, this is borrowed from another talk that I've given, basically who maintains digital infrastructure here's a few names that I would love to say thank you so much. So, it's Daniel Stenberg, who works on curl. Of course, on all of this, the caveat is it's all done with different communities. With the folks at Log4j, Piotr, Christian, and Volkan, I actually learned, and this is maybe another lesson for documentation, is that everything, you don't always realize if you're doing something totally correct. And there's a interview with Christian Grobmeier, I think on the GitHub podcast, around Log4j and Log4Shell, and he actually explains that there were lots of people working on it, but Piotr, Christian, and Volkan were the people that I got to know because they were the ones who were free and available to take on the work contract or sort of the investment from the Sovereign Tech Agency. So the reality is I should really fill this out with many more names. Actually, as I was preparing the talk, I realized that there were some errors in the page on the website, so I just went in and changed them. So all this is okay. We recognize things will not be perfect, but we maintain and update as much as we can. So. And then one last sort of slide so I was at FOSS Backstage earlier this year, and these are a bunch of the folks who we have worked with in the past, and I also wanted to give them a face because, sometimes pictures tell stories better than words do, which is a weird thing to say at the Write the Docs conference. But Tobias, Florian, Jan, Neil, Hugo, and Jarek, they all work on very interesting, different open source projects that are really underpinning all of the world and the things that we do in our world, and I really want to say thank you to them. And in terms of pictures and words, I could not have a talk go by without this XKCD comic, so many thanks to Randall Munroe. All modern digital infrastructure, sometimes you just need something like this that explains what is going on and why you're doing it. So it's very fragile. We're working to support it, and part of that security and part of that support is making sure that we explain what we're doing, which I hope I've done a little bit with you. So on that note, here's my info. If you took a photo, put it on and tag me, because I can't take photos of myself while I'm talking. And thank you very much for listening. Yeah. Do we have time? Okay.
Great. We actually have a few extra minutes for
lovely.
questions, which is great.
Can I sit
Occasion
down?
for a sip of water.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding, of course. And I think you mentioned a sticker. It was a docs or didn't happen sticker.
Yes.
Yes. So thank you so much for the talk. There is a lot of overlap between this community and the FOSS Backstage community. I think it was really wonderful to see these photos at the end, and to also see this intersection between our communities, this venue even, and the human stories, as you pointed out, the XKCD comic, because it is easy to forget that it is people who are making the software and making it happen. So I will proceed with some questions, and we've got quite a few.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'll try to be succinct, which
no pressure. We do have some extra time. But yeah, firstly, lots of thanks for the work that you and that everybody does at the Sovereign Tech Agency.
Thank you. We're doing it for all of you. Yeah.
One question, since you mentioned somewhat open sourcing the model or open sourcing the concept of the Sovereign Tech Agency so that other countries and other governments can benefit and perhaps follow the example that you provide. Have you already had the chance to mentor or collaborate with agencies from other governments?
So we're definitely in a lot of sort of conversations with different groups and organizations. It's taking a while. I think you might all realize that these kinds of things, it was pretty rare and kind of a miracle, I think I would say, in Germany, the result of many people doing work behind the scenes and then having a concept, let's say, when Log4j happened. I can say really concretely, you may have heard that I think Open Forum Europe has a study on Sovereign Tech Fund for the European Union. So they're doing a lot with that, and so that's really exciting. And we also, of course, supported them, and lots of folks were interviewed for it, and we really appreciate sort of that they recognized, the key aspects of how we work. And then I think, don't want to put anyone on the spot. So I'd say there have been lots of conversations, lots of countries have been interested, but it's one of those situations where it kind of takes the right political will and the moment, and it just hasn't popped up yet. But if you are from a country that is interested in doing it, get in touch, because we're always happy to talk and of course to support you. Yeah.
A few questions about, a few meta questions on the role of documentation. A question about whether documentation plays a large role in the grant selection process for projects.
That's a good question. I would have to say, like, to be very honest, I don't know exactly, and I would say also because we are at Write the Docs that we don't give out grants. So we use public procurement and we contract people for work. So not as a correction, but just to make sure that there's an understanding of like how the Sovereign Tech Fund and the Sovereign Tech Agency function. Of course, we I think look at the projects and the communities that are behind them. And so I've noticed, for example, the more mature communities, the folks have been doing it for a little bit longer, who maybe have worked with other outside like funders or organizations in the past, they have if they're able to explain, it goes much easier for me. Maybe that's, by the time it gets to me, I'm like, oh, okay, I get what you're doing. You have 2 paragraphs that are really high level and then get into the technical detail. And I think that always helps all along the way. If you're good at talking about what you're doing, which I guess the training ground for that is your own documentation, maybe even your README, then it does help. But we also have folks on staff who sort of understand the role of particular technologies and particular open source projects in sort of the, let's say, the stack or the ecosystem. So it's not, let's say, an exclusionary criteria, but helpful. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Since you mentioned the stack or the ecosystem, we have a question that mentions the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. Mm-hmm. And the question is if you have collaborated with them or other large organizations.
I think not with CNCF directly. I've met some folks from there at different events, and we've definitely been warm talks. But sorry, what was the second part of the question?
It was just
yeah. So, I mean, just in terms of larger organizations, yes, we for sure have. I think one of the earlier things that I worked on when I first started at the Sovereign Tech Agency was a fairly large project with the OpenJS Foundation, which actually included a whole bunch of sub-projects. So I don't know if it's particularly fair. You can look it up on the technologies section of our website. But that was everything from sunsetting to improving developer experience and things like that. So we have also worked and routed sort of investments through larger organizations like that. Yeah.
Okay. I have a question that may ask you to think a little bit, so I will read it very slowly. Which project have you found to be the biggest challenge to a non-technical audience, and how did you overcome it?
So, I think, and hopefully some of you will laugh because I think it's a joke. I think System D really made me struggle. See, it worked. I don't even I'd have to look it up because it was one of those things where I understood briefly when I was working on the description. I don't even know if there's a description on the website now. We're very backlogged. And I was I'm not quite sure, but I think it's a lot of things. But I think also System D by its nature is the problem is that it's a lot of things together. And so it's a core, I don't know. I don't want to say anything that's wrong, but basically, yeah, I struggled a lot with that. And as you can tell, I struggle today still with that.
All good. Another question. We talked a little bit about the possibility of collaborating with agencies or governments from other countries. Mm-hmm. We have a question about whether you collaborate with other German agencies like Government Tech Campus and a few others that I cannot see right now.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, I mean, I just answered an email. Sorry, I don't want to put them on the spot like this, but we are definitely in very close contact with organizations GovTech Campus. I think before I started working there, that was where our office was. But when I moved in, or when I started, we were already in the new office. But my colleague, or the CEO of the Sovereign Tech Agency, Adriana, was actually in Geneva, last week, where Zendis, the German Center for Digital Sovereignty in the Public Administration, signed an agreement. We also helped support CERN with putting together an audit for one of their tools. So definitely the channels are open with Zendis, and also folks like Digital Service, I really appreciate the work that they're doing.
Yeah, I can see this person also referenced Sprint D.
Oh yeah, Sprint technically is our owner, so I mean,
I see.
I mean, they're the German Federal Agency for Disruptive Innovation, and we were sort of incubated there because Rafael Laguna is the director there, and he used to have an open source company, and so when he heard about the work that we were doing, was like, we can do this here if you want to get started quick, basically, and that's because our model doesn't exactly match so much with like Sprint because they kind of do technology transfer from, let's say, they do lots of things, but one of the prototypical models is from, like, let's say, university research into private sector, into a startup. And so they spin out organizations all the time, and so we've been spun out of Sprint. We're technically owned by them, and in a kind of funny way, I always tell people we are the grandchild of the German government because Sprint is directly owned by the government, and we are technically have Sprint as our shareholder. Metaphors all the way down.
Zeus, very sweet. Okay. Well, thank you. That's all the questions we have for now, but thank you again, and thank you everybody for your questions, and we'll proceed with a short break.
Yeah, thank you for your questions, and thanks for listening.
Great job.